What's up, y'all? I'm Will here with Schedulefly, and this is the Restaurant Owners Uncorked podcast, one of the highest rated hospitality podcasts in the world, brought to you by us at Schedulefly. We provide a very simple web-based restaurant employee scheduling software backed by legendary customer service. If you're on pencil and paper or Excel, or you're on some software with tons of bells and whistles and features you don't need or use, Schedulefly is the perfect place for you. Easy to use, point, click, and go, and we'll take great care of you. Schedulefly.com, free trial, check it out. Also, this podcast is brought to you by our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Restaurant Store, the ultimate destination for restaurant pros. Whether you're launching a new cafe or prepping for the holiday rush, we've got you covered with top-notch equipment and everyday essentials, all at unbeatable prices. And right now, you can score $50 off your order of $250 or more when you use this code, WebSave50. All together, all one word, all caps, WebSave50 at checkout. Again, that's WebSave50, WEBSAVE50. But act fast, because this deal ends December 31st. Visit restaurantstore.com to keep your kitchen running strong. Hey, what's up, y'all? This was an almost 2-hour episode with my friend Chris Deferio, who has a business called Keys to the Shop. This is the world of coffee. So this dude has this badass podcast. If you like coffee, check out Keys to the Shop. Great podcast. He has just crushed phenomenal content for about 7 or 8 years now. He's done like 1,000 episodes, and he also he helps coffee shops be successful. He consults with coffee shops from every stage of the business, and he is a very thoughtful, intentional, incredible dude. I could have talked to him all day. And you will really enjoy this episode. Whether you like coffee or not, whether you like coffee shops or not, we talked about life and business and diet and nutrition and just everything. And it was a lot of fun. So check it out. Thank y'all for watching. Thank you for listening. See you. Chris, introduce yourself real quick.
Well, hey, good to be here, Will. My name is Chris Deferio. I am I guess technically the president, founder, guy who runs Keys to the Shop podcast and consulting. We focus on coffee shops, helping coffee shops run very well, helping, I guess, the people who run coffee shops run very well themselves also. So yeah, in the business of coffee now for this year is 25 years.
I go on your LinkedIn profile this morning and I looked and it said it's got like education, whatever, you're like School of Getting the Work Done, which is freaking, I love that so much, man. That's so, are you from Syracuse? Did you grow up in Syracuse? And now you're in Louisville, right?
Yep. First couple of years of my life, more or less, was in the coastal Oregon. And then we kind of transplanted to or went to New York and Syracuse, and that's my hometown. Yeah, upstate.
Okay. Okay. And you have basically been in the coffee business since you've been making money, right? Since you've been working. Is that right?
All of my professional experience, like I have no college to my name. I had lots of great and difficult and dirty and disgusting jobs throughout, my life here and there, which was great to have that varied experience. But professionally speaking, I heard the call of coffee at my desk in the later 90s, trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. And I just never looked back. I just started and knew it was what I wanted to do. And I've just continued doing it. So that is the bulk of that's all of my professional world.
I mean, were you a coffee drinker as a kid? We were just talking about Mountain Dew. I want to talk about Mountain Dew for just a second, because it sounds like you were a fan too. And how old are you?
I'm 46.
Okay, so we're about the same. I'm 50. Dude, I was telling somebody recently, I drank so much Mountain Dew growing up that it was basically my water. Like I don't remember actually getting a water, like other than drinking at the fountain at school or out of a hose when we were out playing. I don't remember ever actually buying a water until I was probably like in my 20s. I mean, I don't I think I basically drank Mountain Dew, milk, and orange juice. Like
Wow.
those were how I got fluid into my body for most of my life. And then I started working. I got out of school and I started working and started I think by that time in my mid 20s we were like, okay, maybe all the soda is not the best thing. And that's when I started drinking coffee. And then I kind of never looked back. But that was my I guess I've always been jacked up on caffeine is my point, like since I was a kid.
It's the thing, isn't it interesting how if you feed your kid a little bit of coffee, people are like, "Oh, I don't know about that." But you take him to a roller rink. I mean, this dating myself, right? Of course, like the skate parks and all that stuff. Like soda, pizza, that's fine. Caffeine's in the Coca-Cola and the other products, that's fine. But give them coffee, and people kind of raise an eyebrow or two. But yeah, Mountain Dew, I don't know. I liked it a lot, and just like sweet things, sweet
Mhm.
uh, chemically induced states of happiness was just kind of like the theme
Chemically induced
of
states of
childhood.
happiness.
Right. Oh, well, there's the candy you go get your allowance, spend your allowance on candy and soda. And in the
Yep.
early 20s, you start to get really conscious of the fact that, I don't know, you're into philosophy, grappling with your mortality. And then you're like, well, I don't know if this is helpful. For me, I was eating terribly and working in coffee a lot at that time that I really kind of quit that stuff because I started getting panic attacks and stuff. It just kind of the body was revolting against.
Mm.
So grateful for that because some people can go a very long time without any kind of physiological revolt, but getting that early, my body was like, hey, we're going to cut this off right now. It's going to be a little painful, but you need to start actually thinking about what you're putting in your mouth. Coffee, though, had always been sort of like a thing that I drank occasionally with my grandmother. On my father's side, she was the classic kind of crack open the window, get a cup of coffee and a cigarette for breakfast. So if I visited my grandparents, it was she shared her coffee with me, and she had cream. I didn't, so I was always a black coffee drinker.
Yeah.
It was the earliest memory of coffee, but it was a passion that I kind of started pursuing as a customer when I was in my early 20s, going to coffee shops and just journaling. Not like I was going to do it professionally, but I remember, the jazz or the music and the air pots of coffee and the funky colors and stuff of the 90s coffee shop classic vibe. And it really drew me in. That's kind of like the groundwork, no pun intended. It just kind of
Mm.
led me into it.
So tell me about um, your your business. You just told me you've done 1,000 episodes of this podcast, which is phenomenal, by the way. Um, and you consult with coffee shops. So just tell me about Keys to the Shop.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty fascinating to think about now. This is getting on 8 years of doing Keys to the Shop. It launched in January of 2017. And, honestly, the whole concept is to kind of give uh, proper help to the coffee shop community that I love, that I want to see. I want to see more good coffee shops that last a long time and generational impact from those coffee shops where it's not just a thing that's done as well, I want to do this as it's a trend. Like everyone's opening a coffee shop. It's a very low barrier to entry to open a coffee
Mm,
shop.
sure.
But working in coffee for as long as I had before starting the podcast, at that point, I believe it was like 17 years or so. I had taken my licks in terms of, developing character and, messing up royally in lots of different ways, but also being successful in other capacities. And I had been in competitions and lecturing and training and management and all this other stuff, right? So you wear all the hats a little bit as you go through. But I got married and started a family, and I went underground, and I wasn't really out and about in the industry until I started Keys to the Shop, which was really my way of saying, hey, there's not anything right now like this in specialty coffee, because I was going to other podcasts and books for leadership and management, and like, what's the practical stuff that I need in my role as a leader here to do well? Like, I can learn all the live long day about coffee and tasting and the science of extraction, but those things don't make a great coffee shop per se. And that's what I wanted. So that's what Keys to the Shop ended up being. And shortly after I launched the podcast, based on that desire to create that platform, I started offering consulting as a way of recognizing, yeah, maybe at this point in my career, I have some things that might be helpful to other people. I mean, I started consulting really technically. I was like the young professional, like a lot of hubris, saying like, I have some accomplishments. I've been in it for like 2 years. I won an award for my latte art. So why don't I just tell you how to run your business? I go to .com and get my business cards. That makes me a legitimate professional, right? So there was some little uh failed attempts at legitimacy early on, but I needed to go back under and let the industry kind of shape me before I could seek to shape anything. So yeah, Keys to the Shop as a consultancy works with coffee shops and owners, and a lot of times management teams with the owners to help them elevate their operations, their hospitality, the quality of things like that. And I work with a lot of people to help them open coffee shops as well. So it's kind of 50-50 these years, past few years. And that's pretty much Keys to the Shop in a nutshell. It's all about operations, people, and quality.
Operations, people, and quality. Okay. Quality of the product.
Yeah, in quality of everything, right? Like your
Yeah.
experience in the space. Very, very important that the intangibles are made as tangible as possible, so you can have a kind of a planned impact that goes beyond the transaction.
Yeah. I asked about quality of product because it's funny hearing you talk about, this all that it takes to make a good cup of coffee and understanding that. And that's so important, and latte art and so forth. And we kind of think of that as being the key. But man, I don't know what I'm talking about, first of all. So I'll say that. But to me, of course, you have to have good coffee, but a coffee shop's like a community. It's an experience. It's a feeling that you want to replicate. You want to be there, whether you're journaling or you're working or whatever. It's this, well, I guess they call it whatever, the third place or whatever. Like, and I'm not I will have a Starbucks coffee. I don't go to Starbucks. And that's an intentional decision because I tend to prefer to support small local businesses, but I give them a lot of credit. And I'm curious about your thoughts on this. In my mind, I feel like Starbucks did a lot to establish that line of thinking in our culture, which was there's this cool place you can go and spend time, and you're not going to be rushed to leave, and you can hang out and you can be with your friends, or you can just be surrounded by like-minded people that want to be in the same place. But I felt like they established a lot of that thinking. Now I think they've clearly gone in a very different direction over time, but don't we need to credit them in some degree for the success of the idea of a coffee shop being a good place to go?
In some fashion, yes. I think it's the blooming of the consciousness around coffee to a new generation that they kind of brought that concept that had existed for millennia, the third place, right? Like gathering for the purpose of gathering. It was like, I think it's Ray Odenberg or Ogdenberg, I forget which the last name, wrote the Great Good Place book. I've got a couple of his books here on the shelf behind me, and the sociological concept of it, people need and actually have some kind of a slot in their brain or their soul for that thing, and they seek it out in wherever they can find it. And Starbucks helped kind of bring to a larger audience the concept of coffee being a vehicle for that thing that people were using other things for, like barber shops and other
Mm,
bars and sometimes even grocery stores. When people gather together, they have their rituals, and within the ritual there's this hope that that it's not just about me going to go to this place where there's people to get a item. It's more like I want to leave there with something that feels like what I couldn't have gotten at home. And it's not the toilet paper, it's not the milk. It's I'm going to run into my neighbor, or that kind of a thing. And um coffee, yeah, Starbucks did a pretty great job of proliferating that concept, and then it gave this kind of the cliche is a rising tide floats all boats, right? So they brought a new level of awareness that allowed other players in specialty coffee and independent operators to riff off of this new baseline of expectation, that to either achieve that level at their shop and then some, or to do something completely different, knowing that coffee was now a lot more popular as a means to produce that
mm.
socialization. And of course, it's a somewhat addictive substance that you have on a daily basis. It doesn't hurt
Yeah,
that part of
yeah,
it.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
You work with independent coffee shops. Are there, where do you go for, like, what's the sweet spot for you? I mean, you start a coffee shop. Like, I know this guy. Are you familiar with Summit Coffee? Have you ever heard of Summit Coffee? Brian
Uh,
Helfrich. They're here, they're local, and they started in Davidson, North Carolina, it's a little small town north of Charlotte, and now they've got, I don't know, 12 or 15 locations or whatever it is, but they're growing, right? Like they're going to grow.
yeah.
Um, what's the sweet spot for the types of places that you work with? Is it typically just a single location, or is it growing concepts, or both?
Yeah. Great question. I feel like we talk about this on the show quite often, and it's about responsible scaling and scaling with intention and integrity. I don't mind if somebody has a lot of shops. I mean, as long as what's behind those shops is something that is uh, beneficial to the people involved,
Yeah.
it great that you're opening many stores. So the sweet spot for me is really based on people who I want to work with, people who are intentional, people first already in their desire for what they're doing in their business. Um, I have turned down people whose you gather from or them in conversation, or they explicitly state that what they're trying to do is like make bank, scale, like franchise like crazy, and you can kind of tell that what they're trying to do is create somewhat of a portfolio for themselves. And having worked in the industry as much as I have, again, in small to mid-sized coffee shops, not huge companies. Most of my experience has been in these really small mom pop type, scaling from 1 to 2 stores or 2 to 3 stores, and it's a huge deal. The amount of dysfunction that exists within a company, if it's not addressed in the early stages with patience and
Mm,
cultivation to build a good foundation, once you start scaling, and God help you if you get an infusion of cash that creates a lot more confidence where you should have a little more hesitation, then you just spread that out to the masses. So my desire is not to try to make more successful people who have a little bit too much assumption toward what they're doing in coffee. I want to work with people who, be it 1 or 12 stores, are have that integrity of this has to serve all the people involved. We want to grow responsibly, and we're willing to be patient in the process of not only growing our business but growing ourselves in the process. Because that, and I tell people that, especially the last few weeks, for some reason this has been something I've said to a lot of people. um, you yourself have to become and grow into the type of person who can handle the success that you believe you want right now. And if you get it right now, you'll mishandle it. So, a bit of a personal development part of this that leads into team development, that leads into a responsible scaling. And then there's even the idea that you don't need to keep growing. Sometimes you can just stay where you are, and that's where you are, and you don't need to chase something that the industry tells you that you need to chase. That's called like projecting your insecurity in a business plan, right? Or your goals. So
Yes,
yeah, that's kind of how I would explain the sweet spot for me.
brother, man. I
Mm.
love the way you think about it. That's, you know, well, first of all, hats off for turning down folks that have that sort of like, I'm going to make bank. I mean, I feel like if you, I've always felt this in business, just in general, not coffee shops. I just think in business, if your intention is to make a lot of money, that's like your underwriting objective. Um, you may be able to do that, but my estimation is if you are focused on something much bigger than that, the byproduct will be the financial success. I just think if the financial success is the goal, to me, it seems myopic and like you're actually taking a lot more risk because you'll probably set yourself up to make short-term decisions that could impact your business and your financial success negatively. Again, maybe you'll figure it out. Uh, I tend to believe that if you look at like great businesses, I always refer to Patagonia. It's like Patagonia, that guy Yvonne, money, like the financial success was never the objective. Now that guy's worth a ton of money now. I think he's giving his business essentially away, but um, the financial success was never the goal. It was never the point. It was to build a something that had meaning, that he and his team cared about, that they were passionate about, that had a higher purpose. And because of that, that financial success became the byproduct. But the reason it became the byproduct is because people want to be, and this goes back to that third place, like we want to be in a, like people are in tribes, like we're tribal, right? Like we want to find our tribe. And if you believe in something passionately and you're authentic about it, it's not some like marketing ploy, but it's like people sense that, right? And they'll follow you. You know, it's like that line in Braveheart where William Wallace looks at Robert the Bruce and he goes like, people will follow you if you would just lead them. And I always like, I think that's so true in business. If you have something you really truly believe in down to your core and you pursue that doggedly with passion and love and energy, people will follow that. You know, it will take time to build that tribe, but if you always go back to that genuine intention, then people will follow you. And then probably financial success will come with that. That may be the byproduct. But more importantly, and I think something that you were just touching on is your sense of purpose in your life and your meaning and your just overall happiness will come with that. And that is really more important, probably to guys like you and I, or folks like you and I, when you get to this point in your life where you're in your 40s, your 50s, where you're like, yeah, like, okay, sure, you need to be able to pay your bills and, you know, you want to make sure you're not like struggling to put food on the table every day. But after a certain point, it's like, I'm more interested in being proud of what I've done, right? Like, and that's probably something that a lot of young folks, this is why I think what you're doing is so cool and important, Chris, is that I wouldn't have understood that when I was in my 20s. I just you almost can't. Like you kind of have to experience it to a point. But if you have the right guidance and mentorship and you've got this passion and you want to do things, but you have somebody that's like helping you stay in your lanes and stay focused on what really matters, i.e. Chris and what you're doing at Keys to the Shop, that's a good place to be because you'll find that the happiness and fulfillment that comes along with that is so much more meaningful than making bank, as you said.
Yeah, well, that's well said. I am Also, I think the same way, which is that in your early 20s, there's this I think especially a lack of mentorship that
Yeah.
is for young people, is, but older people are busy doing what they're doing, and then younger people aren't seeking mentorship because they don't know how to ask for help.
Yeah.
Uh, and having, even if Keys to the Shop as a podcast has content out there that drives you into the idea that that what you're doing right now is not the end all of your career. There's way more to it that is going to happen later. That drive to be isolated as a young person in a professional world is is part of you wanting to prove yourself to an industry that, if you really look at it, doesn't really care. They don't, they're not concerned about you but you're really concerned about them. And then you realize later on, man, I was trying to impress all of my peers, but my peers were kind of just doing their work as well, but we're not together sharing stories to really build our capacity and our
Yeah.
ability to kind of wake up different muscles in our bodies and our minds to uh, pick up those meaningful things early on. I think that's the key, is like, you start in any profession with a certain kind of a passion that's a gateway to that thing. If you were just got into coffee because you had a coffee that you really enjoyed one day and it just blew your mind and it just was like a domino effect, what you're going to have a hard time doing is letting go of the initial catalyst that drove you to allow other things to drive you. And so you're always going to pursue the coffee and the taste of the coffee, but you don't have the capacity, let's say, to enjoy a really, when all the operational stuff works well together and a customer is happy at your counter, it's harder to enjoy that moment for somebody who has not learned how to expand their capacity to receive fulfillment from their work and only focuses on the initial thing that drove them in the industry, which is taste or latte art, or whatever it is. So there's this little death occasionally that has to happen to the old to give way to the new. It's very cyclical, very
Mhm.
poetic to think about the seasons and the ebb and the flow of your life and your career. Um, but I think it's a very helpful way to put it, because it teaches you the skill that, not everything you think right now is 100% correct. Um, and you might have a lot to learn, even from the people who don't technically know as much as you do. We tell owners all the time about how, your staff, they have a lot to teach you in terms of how the function of your cafe is and how you're perceived in your leadership in the cafe when you're there day in and day out. Um, the big step for every owner and every operator is that vulnerability to allow
Mhm.
themselves to give away something that no longer serves them versus, sort of sticking with that thing and saying, well, I'm never going to change. I just need to seek people who harmonize with this one way that I'm going to be the rest of my life. Um, so yeah, there's this passion that drives us to pursue restaurants or bars or hospitality, but then we have to apprentice ourselves to the process and allow ourselves to be changed, like I said before, or else we're not going to really be great at our jobs. And we won't provide people who come to our stores and our cafes the benefit of seeing other human beings serving them. What they'll see
Mhm.
is people serving the plan, serving the industry, but not serving them. You can kind of see through that stuff, and that, it leads to success when you can really touch something deeper than just the transactional.
Have you ever read the book Mindset by Carol Dweck?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I had such a fixed mindset, like growing up. I totally had a fixed mindset. And like for half my life, it was like, I know I'm right. It's like how it's amazing how much you think you're right about things when you're young, and you know you're right, and this is the way that it should be. And man, I read that book after I started to realize that, like ego is a problem, and ego prevents the vulnerability that allows you to learn and grow. And then, but I think it's such a simple concept. Like if you have a growth mindset, you know, it doesn't matter what you don't know or what you're quote not good at. That's the opportunity to be better. Like those are the things you want to lean into, not shy away from. And I suspect there's a big component of that with what you do in talking to owners and probably identifying those that may or may not have that mindset. But that's the mentality you really have to have success that endures, I'm assuming.
Oh yeah, of course. And once you get like we talk about values a lot. I just had a onboarding call with a new client yesterday, and we started to talk about operational values as a framework for making all of your decisions. So we go through kind of a worksheet, and they're in the midst of that now. Um, but the mindset that you have to have is not, yeah, you want to learn as much as possible, but the world of the market, right? They know that you want to learn. So they give you the three easy steps, the 10, 10 things that, and I'm guilty. I label podcasts with numbers as well, but there is a certain sense in which there's an inefficiency that's necessary. I think it's like a throttling mechanism that allows you to sit long enough with your own thoughts and observations of what you're doing to answer some of the questions that you outsource to other people because you don't like the uncomfortable nature of that silence. It's like if you can't sit in silence for a spell, how are you going to really understand what's needed? So yeah, it's uncomfortable sometimes. People say, well, we want this manual, like download a templated manual to just like insert into our coffee bar. Or they'll have like Chat GPT write all of their policies and all of their everything else. The issue is that it's not yours. It's not something that's going to be as effective because you'd like to think that you're unique. You like to think that you want to be an effective leader. But if you haven't really gone through and sat with the issue long enough to have something specific that you want to make your own and use your own language, um, it's kind of the siren song of efficiency over effectiveness. You'd
Mm,
much rather have the minimum viable effective product in the form of like 5 sheets of paper versus this tome of policy and manuals, because that 1 5 sheet stack is something that you're intimately familiar with. You did a lot of work on. You're 100% positive that this is the direction you want to go, whether it's values or policies, etc. You need that because then when the tough times come, you're going to stick by more likely the thing that will guide your company into the future versus try to swap out. Well, I guess we just chose the wrong download. So we're going to like re-download. We're going to
yeah,
read.
yeah, yeah.
So it's kind of a unique challenge, but talking with owners and people, even in opening coffee shops, there is a fear. There's a lot of insecurity, and yeah, past opening especially. I mean, it's almost easier to open a place than it is to run it afterwards. You know, um, so there's a discipline, and I like the phrase apprenticing yourself to the process. I'm a big fan of an author named David White. He's an Irish poet who does work with companies also on vocation and identity and the journey of midlife. I'm re-listening to a book he wrote called uh, what is it? What to Remember When Waking, and it's very encouraging. It's very soul satisfying because everything else you interact with in the industry is all about very practical, making things that don't need to be as easy easier than they
Mhm.
should be, and robbing you of the lessons that you need, like the good bacteria that you need in your
Yeah,
gut
yeah.
to function in the world that you're entering. So yeah.
Uh, how, so, okay, I want to talk about your podcast. You've recorded, somewhere around 1,000 episodes.
It's getting close to 1,000. It's in the mid 900s, I think now.
Okay.
All shows that have been published.
You've been doing this since 2017.
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay. 7 years, 8 years. Okay. So you're doing 100-ish a year. Is that ramped up recently or has it been pretty consistent?
Specials we do on Tuesdays we do a full length episode, and then on Thursdays we do about 10-15 minute shift break episodes. Uh, Last Friday of the month, or a second to last, we do Founder Friday. So we talk with owners about their entrepreneur story.
Okay.
Um, we've done roasting specials live at trade shows, different things like that. So
Got it. Love it. Do you, how many, how many customers do you work with at a time? Like how many different coffee shops are you supporting right now?
right now we're probably, last count was like 10 to 12, at various levels of the engagement. Some people are like all in, where I've been to their shop a couple of times. We've done assessments and a lot of coaching and training. And other people are just kind of shorter term, a few months of every other week coaching and consulting sessions, walking through some specific issues. So it's having a larger number like that of 10 to 12 is more manageable when you've got a little bit of a mix of deliverables. If it was all 12 of them were like super in-depth, hands-on, me traveling, first of all, I'd be an irresponsible father and husband because I would
Yeah.
never be
Yeah.
home.
Right.
So it's about 10 to 12 right now.
All over is it US primarily or?
Well, there's some people that I've, had the pleasure of talking with in like the Philippines, or um, down in Belize or Canada. A lot more in the US, of course. So,
So you travel some, you do a lot of it remote. Um,
mhm.
how do people, they come to you? They come and say, "Hey, I've heard you're great at what you do. I need some help."
Yeah, there's some people, I've always been surprised that some people have no idea that I have a podcast. But because most of the people will hear the show, and it took a my wife had to convince me to advertise the consulting services on the show, because I was just like, I don't want to talk about like stuff like that. Let's talk about the guest and all this. But I'm glad we did. And that's where most people hear about Keys to the Shop as a consulting and coaching service. And others just Google search consultants. And so maybe the reach of the show, the length and the amount of episodes helps the search engine, kind of spit out that Keys to the Shop is out there. So I'm always happy when people find me no matter what.
Uh, so you clearly do a lot of reading, but you mentioned listening to, like, do you read? I see a lot of books here. Do you read physical books most often, or do you listen? Because I know you're out walking a lot, or both.
I like both. I would
Okay.
say, um, especially the last few months, I've been really bad about like sitting down with books. I've
Yeah.
just felt like I've been run off my feet a little bit. When you're running downhill and you feel like you're about to lose control, that kind of a feeling.
Yep.
Uh, that's it. So audiobooks, I've actually started doing about 3 or 4 miles a day in the morning in the woods to try to anchor, and I will listen to an audiobook. Sometimes it'll be a podcast, but usually it's an audiobook. And then you get your thoughts out, do some praying, do some just centering, and when you come back, it feels a lot better. So physical books, though, there's something about it in it. It forces you to interact with
Hmm.
the topic. So I have, on the shelf behind me, I love old books. I love the smell of old books,
Yep.
the so I have some antiquated books, and there's other new ones that I enjoy. Um, and I've always kind of been attracted to books that are a little bit more holistic in nature, approaching specific subjects, and it could be like management or something. But the concept really has to make sense to me for me to jump in there because everybody's got like 17 books on the same subject, but from 12 different angles. And I just want like one very deeply meaningful book because at the end of the day, it's really just about putting to action the things that you already know. And
Hmm.
I'm guilty of, you know, procrastinating, as I've heard it called, where you just like, oh, you just got to learn more, got to learn more. But are you doing what you already learned? I'm guilty of just like stacking up all of these like idea calories and I'm just like not using them. So
Yeah. Yeah. There is, well, okay. So see, that's the thing about podcasts and audiobooks and everything else. I think you probably know, I got this is my phone now, right? So I don't have the iPhone anymore. I had one, but I didn't like who I was when I had that thing. And part of my problem was I really like to learn and consume content. But the problem was, I mean, like I would listen to I got rid of it 4 years ago. I'd listen to podcasts so often and get so consumed that I would, my wife would be like, "Hey, can you go to the store and get these three things? I need these to cook dinner." And then I find myself sitting in the grocery store parking lot for 45 minutes because I don't want to, oh, what's next in this? But, and it's like, holy crap. Like, I would just get lost in it. And the idea of we talked about this earlier about efficiency and you can consume so much now through your phone, whether it's books, whether it's podcasts, you can use every waking minute to be consuming while you're doing stuff. And it's like, yeah, but then I went, why? Like, what about having some dead time and some margin and like not being efficient and having some slack in the system? And that's been an interesting thing because I went from like really consuming a lot of content to not consuming a lot of content, but to being very intentional about what I do consume and being very present when I consume it now. Like I can't listen to podcasts really anymore, except for I listen when I go on a drive. Like my daughter goes to Penn State. I live in Charlotte. It's 9 hours and there's no direct flight. So we're driving up there a lot. But dude, I have to like download it onto this laptop and like literally download it and open the laptop and sit it in the center console and like play it through that, which is ridiculous. I know. But because I have to do the work to actually make it happen, I'm just like really dialed in when I listen. I have to be like real thoughtful, like, okay, like what am I going to listen to? And then so it's been an interesting thing, but the pendulum with where I'm getting with all this is like, so here we are in schedule flights. It's tech, right? But kind of low tech. But the pendulum with so many things, it swings so far in one direction. So you went from like not having access to anything and then having access where we just go so far. It's like everything's on the phone. It's all great. But then you start looking at people that are just walking around and like everybody's got neck problems because all they do is look at their phone and they listen to stuff and they're not present. And you go in a coffee shop and for years it was like, well, what's the point? Like everybody's just sitting there on their stupid phone. But now we're starting to kind of collectively realize like maybe that's not what we should do. And it kind of, the equilibrium sets back in. Like Amazon was going to kill all bookstores and Barnes and Noble kind of made it through and now you're seeing independent bookstores again and like there's these extremes, right? Like there's one extreme of like Amazon and then there's the other extreme of like the local independent bookstore and I freaking love seeing that. There's the Starbucks which is all efficient and everything's perfect and everything's great and then there's the you know mom and pop single location coffee shop and people are realizing how cool that is. So I always like when equilibrium kind of sets back in and and by the way, I'm not trying to convince you or anybody that like doing this is the right thing with this stupid flip phone and a laptop that you have to open when you drive. But there's probably something better than like being locked in on these damn phones like all the time.
Yeah, I mean, are we chasing the idea of something that we're never going to realize for fear of seeing the ideal become imperfect in the doing? Like I have this optimum version of a coffee shop. It's my business plan, or I have an optimum version of my life as a like I want to be the perfect dad or the perfect husband, and I gotta hack this or I gotta tip, 6 tips to do that. And if I fall short, then all of my energy goes to feeling guilty for not having executed on what I was told was the
Yes.
way to do that, the best way to do this. And the truth is that, I like the phrase higher degrees of imperfection. I think that's a great way to think about like what I'm doing now.
Mhm.
If I just am faithful to take the next step of what I know is the most like, we'll just say nutritionally dense with conviction thing before me, then and when I look back, it's going to make more sense. It's going to make sense. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make it make sense in the future. And I don't think that's possible to do. We want to remove all that risk. We want to remove all that uncomfortable stuff and have a guarantee that if you in my contracts, well, a person I look up to in the industry said, you got to put this in your contracts. It says, basically, we do not guarantee you that you will be successful.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to put that in there because people will assume that, well, we had a consultant and by all rights, we should have been wildly successful. But you can't put that on one thing. It's a multivariate problem. And by removing certain things from your life the way you have, I think that's really admirable. Like you are able to say, well, maybe I am enough. Maybe I have enough. Maybe that thing that I was going to do for 45 minutes to an hour, that wouldn't have enriched my life as much as what I just did, which was be more present for the people that still rely on me to be that person
Yeah.
for them. I think it's great, and we could all learn something of that. I have actually later today we have an episode we're going to be interviewing. His name is Armin. He is one of the owners of a company started by his father called Arto Brick in LA. They do stonework and tile work, and that tile right there is a gift from them. That was pretty cool. But they do restaurants, they do coffee shops and other spaces, and it's a great company. But it's all about we're on the same wavelength when it comes to like creating spaces that create sort of a grounding of the experience and tending to the details. You mentioned bookshops. He sent me in the mail this book, which I thought was great. It's called Shopkeeping
Dude, you
by,
told me about that. I have it bookmarked. Yeah.
yeah. So Peter Miller, bookseller out in Seattle, famous. He's been doing his bookshop for 45 years. And this is like, people talk about like Marcus Aurelius meditations, like the Stoic and all this stuff. I feel like that's what this book is for people who curate their shops and their spaces. And it really is just like, this is what I want, as an operator, as a customer, to know that where that book was placed was intentional. The way that I interact, even if it's stressful today, I have a presence and a mindfulness and a way that I go about things that is hard fought for. And it's not something that those 3 easy step purveyors were able to give me. It was what I gave myself by giving myself that margin that you were talking.
Mm. How are coffee shops doing in general right now? And I ask that in the context that it has been a tough year for a lot of restaurants, right? So at the chain level, you're seeing bankruptcies. At the individual operator level, you're just seeing, I mean, just a lot of the people I talk to are like, this is the hardest year we've had, maybe since 08, 09 or whatever. Costs are up. The consumers kind of tapped out in a lot of places, and some of this is depends on where you are. But just generally speaking, pretty hard year right now for a lot of folks in the hospitality space. Tell me about what you're seeing with your customers and coffee shops in general.
I think the hard thing is, for what I see, costs, of course. with
Yeah.
inflation, and it's maybe not going to get better. Who knows? Um, and the employee crisis, like or staffing crisis, we have given it this convenient name, as a almost a way of absolving ourselves from any kind of doing and in creating it. Um, so there is a in my mind, there's these two things. People are always stressing about, getting people to work in their cafes. And also then things cost a lot of money. We don't know if we're gonna, it's a tight margin. Coffee
Yeah.
shop, I'd say most coffee shops are making, if they're making 5% at the end of the year profit, they're happy. The good ones are doing 10, and the really good ones are like 15, like at the end of all their costs, etc. It's not a great margin in terms of profitable business. And the state of coffee shops right now is everyone's having to reckon with who they want to be. You've
Mm.
got Seven Brew, you've got all these other, like it's almost like one good night you'll see like 12 mushrooms pop up in your lawn because of the atmosphere. And that's how these drive-throughs pop up now. It's like out of nowhere, Blank Street Coffee in New York City and all those places. And people look at that because again, they're not looking at what they're doing so much. They're looking at the greater industry, which is mistake number one in my opinion. Um, and they're freaking out. And they're like, well, the next thing we need to do is a drive through. The next thing we need to do is offer all of these like energy syrups and like bells and whistles and boba and seven matchas and everything else. We need to proliferate in order to compete, um, because there's no root within themselves yet. And
Mm.
so that's the identity crisis I think a lot of people are coming up against. And I like to try to speak to on the show. Um, where like the center circle of your community and the people you serve, are the first people you should be concerned with and study. But we skip a few rings and we jump all the way to macro data that says customer trends that are based on aggregated data from profiles of people that you'll never meet in
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
your customers. So what is it you should be doing? How can you be very simple and effective and serve your people? That's the state of coffee shops right now, is struggling for margin, struggling to compete, and or to figure out if they should compete. And there are a lot of people who got into it with the promise of either financial success, or they thought it would be really easy, that it's really chill, kind of the way baristas sometimes apply for a job and they say, well, this place is kind of chill. I'd like to have this barista job. It seems fun. But then you get into it and it's like, oh no, this is real work. Um, so you see people fall off a lot, and it's an opportunity for people to then be more responsible in our marketing to those who would open coffee shops, to say, okay, here's how to trim your menu down to its most effective form. Here's how to, maybe if you have a leaner staff, how can you professionalize those roles and make it a little bit like you pay them a little bit more, they're responsible for more things, you invest way more than you ever have in them, but they don't quit. And you rearrange the bars so that the roles and positions are more effective, and there's an efficiency to the work that allows energy to be maintained for longer periods during the shift. So these are challenges, but they're also opportunities. Raise your prices, please. I mean, like, you can do that. In the amount of money that people spend on ridiculous things in their lives, versus you can charge more for what you're serving right now. It's the do the math, figure out what you're actually spending, get the cost of goods. But the amount of times that I've had to basically get, it's going to be okay, raise your price,
Yeah.
and it happens overnight. Nobody, even at like sometimes a dollar raise of price, not a single person mentions anything to any barista. It happened overnight and they're making more money. And the thought pops into your mind, why didn't we do this sooner?
Right. Yeah. Hey, y'all, running a restaurant, as we all know, is no easy task, but Webstaurant Store has your back. From heavy-duty equipment to everyday kitchen essentials, we've got everything you need to stay stocked all year long. And right now, you can save $50 on your order of $250 or more when you use the code WEBSAVE50 at checkout. That's WEBSAVE50, WebSave50. But hurry, this offer is only available until December 31st. Visit webstaurantstore.com today to snag some savings. And y'all, I'll throw in this piece. That's what they asked me to say. These folks are awesome to work with. They have a great website, highly regarded, a lot of happy customers, and we're super stoked to have them as a sponsor. So go check them out, webstaurantstore.com. And again, that code is WebSave50. Thanks. Yeah, fear's a driver, a lot of that stuff. That's the downside of, again, with technology, there's great social media. There's wonderful things about that. But just as our kids these days are seeing, like, what other kids are doing and these great lives that they're leading, and they're like, oh, God, business people do that too. Seven Brews. I have heard of Seven Brews. Obviously, I guess everybody has. My guess, I don't know anything about them. I'm assuming there's a lot of money behind them. There's a lot of flash. There's a lot of this and that, and it's all exciting and everything. But like, I don't know. Is that something that, like, what's the real goal there? And I'm suspicious. Now, the thing is, though, if you understand that, okay, at a macro level, people are highly programmable, right? There's a term I love called moist robots. And you can program people very easily if you know what you are doing, right? So if you start really understanding behavioral psychology, and you can program people to do things that are not healthy for them, because most people are not stopping and present and thinking. They're on autopilot, and they're very easy. So you go, like, it drives me freak. I almost started like a social, or like a account on social media to document something that I find to be the most fascinating and both maddening but hilarious things ever in my mind, which is, you can go, it's not uncommon in Charlotte. I'm sure it's probably in a lot of places, particularly like where there's Starbucks with drive-throughs. Dude, I find this fascinating. And my kids like laugh at me all the time because, like, I'm like, look at that line. There's 37 cars in line for drive-through coffee. There's not one car parked. There's no line inside there. You can look in there and see there's nobody in line. They're sitting in their cars. They're ordering on a phone. Like, what in the world? Like, is that what that's meant to be? Like, is that what we talked this last week. Like, I'm glad to see this new CEO has come in and said, like, holy cow, we've like depersonalized everything. Like, our menu's too complicated. We got to pare down the menu. They bought 200,000 Sharpies so that you actually write the customer's name, which is messy and not quote efficient, but like, that's what people really want. And so we get led into this process where it's like, I'm sitting in a car, I'm ordering on a screen. So I don't even maybe even make eye contact with like, maybe just have a robot if you're going to do that. Like, that's cool. Like, go for it. Again, that's one extreme. That's the Amazon version or whatever. But once people start to realize this, they go, wait a minute, like, what do they seek? They seek the old, independent old building with cracks in the brick, and that's done with intention and thought and care. And they've pared down and done less, not done more. If you try to, as an independent coffee shop, I suspect at least, if you try to compete with Seven Brews and all the money, that's a recipe for failure, I would guess. Like, I look at our company again. We've never raised $1 in venture capital, right? We bootstrap this business. We're tech, but we're like low tech, right? Like, real simple. If we try to go compete on tech with Seven Shifts and Hot Schedules and all these companies that have raised billions of dollars, we'll fail. Like, there's no doubt we will fail. We cannot keep up with that. But if we go, that's fine, cool. There's always like if those people, all the other companies want to compete for the people that are looking for that, let them. But over here, we believe that there's always people that just want something simple and they want really good customer service. And if we lean into that, well, we can win there because they can't replicate what we're doing, which is simplicity and customer service and like really leaning into taking great care of people. Does it mean that we probably can't have $1 billion exit one day? Yeah, probably does. Does that matter? Uh-uh. Nope. Because we enjoy it and we're happy and the people we serve love it. And I would think that coffee shops, you're probably fighting that battle, I would guess, with owners that are kind of like freaking out, like, oh, we got to do it. You just mentioned all the boba and the syrups, like easy there, like easy. Maybe instead of doing more, do less, but do it really, really well and lean into what can control. You can control how people feel when they come into your place. You can control how you interact with those customers. Do you thank them for their business? Do you call them afterwards and be like, man, really thank you for coming in today? Like, who does that? Like, that is memorable and differentiated and badass. And people do recognize that and they'll come back for more of that.
Yeah, the return on that investment is in a vein of skill that we're not taught. So to receive. So if you do something that is others focused like that, you might not be able to see it in the bar graph that you look at and the report at the end of the week. And we've kind of shown ourselves, we've kind of ushered ourselves into this live by the metrics, you know,
Oh,
such
yeah,
a put down focus. Now, of course, I like to say like a EKG can show you that your heart is beating, but it can't show you the quality of your life.
that's right.
And if you just live by the numbers, you do have to have numbers that show and indicate something positive. And if they're off, then of course, how are you going to pay your staff if you're not profitable? I mean, this is
Yeah.
basic. But we'd like to make it more complex than that, and we do. And so you're right. People want something simple, and it's actually coffee shops before there was the point of sale the way we know it today, and the fully integrated bells and whistles that are the must-haves tech stack of a successful coffee shop, as they would have you believe. Coffee shops actually were in business and did well. What black magic was behind that? Uh, and if you think about it for a second, it literally been sold a bill of goods. And I just posted this morning on a forum. Somebody posted on a coffee forum, what's your POS, go to POS? And I was like, first of all, no coffee shop has ever gone out of business because they chose the wrong point of sale. It is all to do with the things you're talking about, Will, which is the value delivery of the promise you make to people with the advent of your shop. So you open up, people think you know what you're doing. I mean, you just like coffee more than the average person, you're going to get Christmas gifts that are coffee themed the rest of your life. People assume expertise immediately.
Yeah.
So you have a lot to live up to already. And why don't people go into that Starbucks? Because they know what it's like to be inside that Starbucks at some point and they didn't like it. And it was much more comfortable to be in their car than to risk a bad service experience, trudging through the snow or going, even just expending a little bit of energy. So there is a little bit of complicity that the industry has for not delivering a true value proposition to the customer in the experience and instead treating them just as they will inevitably treat their coffee as a commodity, right?
Mm,
So
yeah.
the tide is turning, and I do think that that's really fun. The idea that Starbucks has bought 200,000 Sharpies. I was telling my client the other day, I said, now all these coffee shops who were desperate for certainty decided that they were going to get the sticker ticket printers. They were going to put the tickets on the cups because that's what the big people are doing. And if they're doing it, they're doing it for a good reason. And then all of a sudden, they're like, we don't think that's a good reason. We kind of hate it. I was like, well, but I did because you did that.
Yeah.
Well,
Yep.
Lucy just pulled the football from Charlie Brown, and then we're just going to keep doing it again and again.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, I'm so happy that you mentioned that comment in that forum. Dude, if you if you think that tech is going to be the key to your success in your hospitality business, brother, you're being hoodwinked, you're being misled. That's not going to end well. Um, I, I will say that all day long. I'll tell people if you can do a schedule on pencil and paper or Excel or whatever, you don't even use like just do that. Like do the most basic and simple thing that you are in. And you mentioned something earlier about using AI to write a handbook or whatever. You I start thinking about AI in terms of like, oh well, I could just use AI to make my schedule and things like that. And people are like, yeah, that sounds cool. Cause then it frees you up, right? But the bottom line is like you kind of want to be in there knowing what's going on, knowing who's working and why that person is working that shift. And you know, he just broke up with her, so we probably shouldn't schedule that. Like all these little things that are just human and real, like the siren song of efficiency. And if I just deploy this stuff and then it'll do, and then I'm free to do what? Like, what are you going to do with that?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, if it's going to free you up, then hopefully it's that you're in there even more talking
Mhm.
to your customers or thanking people for their business or making, sure like that the experience is really good. But the reality is we think, oh, if I just have all this tech, then I won't have to do as much. And that's a big mistake. Like, cause then you're distancing yourself from the business and like what's really going on. And there's a lot of people that have raised a lot of money that have to provide a return on that money to their investors that have a lot of incentive to convince you that if you only buy this tech, things are going to be better. And I just say, please be careful of that because it's a recipe for disaster, in my opinion. And I think that's going to self-correct a lot, Chris, over the next few years because look, money was free for a decade. So there's a lot of tech that sounded good to VC people that was designed by people that never actually ran a restaurant and it's being shoved down a lot of people's throats. And now the money's not there anymore because it's not free anymore. And so all these businesses have to stand their business model up on something other than that next round of cash. And it's gonna be interesting. I'll say that. But I wrote this, I wrote this post on LinkedIn like a week ago. And it's about Brawley Seed Company. And Brawley Seed Company was started by my grandfather up in Mooresville, North Carolina in 1946. So, right, they're almost 80 years old. Grandfather started it with the GI Bill. My uncle ran it. Now my cousins run it. And I mean, Mooresville, North Carolina is literally where Lowe's is headquartered. So you're talking about this, you know, garden center, this small independently owned seed store garden center, and then Lowe's is headquartered in your backyard. And I'll be honest, I mean, I thought like 20 or 30 years ago when Lowe's started, I'm like, man, they're screwed. Like they're not going to make it. It was the whole thing with like, well, it's an independent bookshop and there's Amazon now. They're done. And a lot of them did close up. A lot of bookshops did, a lot of garden centers did or whatever. They got through it and now they're thriving more than ever because people love the weirdness and authenticity of this little cool 80-year-old garden center that is ridiculously low tech. I'm surprised they even take credit cards. Like they take credit cards now, but like it is so freaking low tech. They have not, it's not sleek, it's not new, it's not modern. And they actually lean into the fact. My cousin posted this thing recently, and it was like she was holding a picture of the outside of that building 50 years ago. She's like holding an actual picture and then took a picture of what the building looks like now, which is basically the same. And her post was like, I'll butcher this a little bit, but it was like your cracks and your stains are just your history and your memories. And I was like, yes, like
Yeah.
people love that. And I just hope that um, all of the wonderful people in the world of independent coffee shops will lean into the quote flaws and the inefficiencies, not try to compete with all that money. It's a recipe for it's not going to happen. Like it's a road to eventual failure in my opinion.
Yeah. Wow, that's a really great example of legacy and a a kind of service that people build memories. They build
Yes.
home,
Yes.
hardware. People build relationships in a coffee shop of all kinds. They have relationships with themselves, of who they are becoming, the work that they're doing, the people that they're talking to. And if you cultivate the ability to enjoy the joy of other people in the thing that you do, you'll be less likely to feel that insecure impulse to jump at the promise of a unassociated tech company. And it might look really strange to you, like the way that earlier we were talking about Mountain Dew. It would be really strange for me to drink one right now because I know I'm trying to find things that actually are nourishing.
Yeah.
Are are they as exciting? Are they bright green, and fizzy? Not no, but I've moved past the need for bright green fizzy things in my life, and so yeah, it's like that reckoning is happening because people are remembering and realizing that the promise didn't actually solve the thing that it said it solved, and it's insidious too sometimes because we talk about this with super automatic espresso machines that people use. So there's contexts where, like in a spa, where people are not trained to do this, like that's a godsend because God forbid some of the attendants try to make manually, some espresso. You probably won't
Yeah.
go back. Uh, but it's not impossible. Some of the world's best restaurants still use great equipment and make it by hand. But the promise is it'll free you. You mentioned this. I loved it. Free you up to do what? You said to do what? And I say that all the time. Like if a barista is freed up to focus on the customer, that's going to be real awkward if we're just staring deeply into their eyes while the machine is making a coffee. Like, what are you doing? Well, I'm attending to you. But part of it is making the coffee. That's like your job.
Yeah.
So that's how you focus on the customer is you can't just give away everything. There's a limit to the Michael Gerber working on your business versus in your business. There's a limit to
Mm.
that. And people
Yeah.
just use that as a mantra to abdicate themselves from things that they truly should be responsible for. And unfortunately, then it creates this like downward spiral instead of a virtuous cycle.
I know a restaurant owner in Colorado. He's been at it for 40 years, got a restaurant group, very successful. And he'll tell you this straight up. Like he will admit this. He always gets this idea in his head that he can hire in a C. This is like they got, I don't know, 15 locations. It's like a $50 million a year business. He's like, I can bring in a CEO and then I can kind of extricate myself a little bit and have more freedom and all this kind of stuff and, enjoy my life more and be out there doing stuff when traveling and it's happened twice in the last decade. He brings them in. He can't extricate himself because he loves his business. He doesn't want to extricate himself. And he realizes the CEO is just causing more problems than he or she is solving. And he's like, he ends up firing him and then getting back in. And every time he just did it again recently. He's like, I don't know why I always get suckered into thinking that he's like, I'm going to work and like, I'm going to be doing this till I, am in my grave. I'm like, yeah, dude, you are like, quit thinking that like, the CEO and this, it's the same as the tech. It's like, you can't outsource your passion and your love and like why you got where you are. Like, I'd say lean into that stuff. Like, you're never going to be happy if you're not doing the things that you did that you if you're not serving your passion for that business, you'll always be like, and you just get anxious and then you'll want to go back.
Yeah.
Why is Starbucks going back? They too much on the menu, all that. Like, let's just go back. Like via negativa, you know, a taking away is often better than adding, right? Like it's better to remove things than to add things and get down to that core. Right? And they asked, and it's probably not even true, but when they asked Michelangelo, like, how did you create David? And he goes, oh, he has this big block of stone. He's like, oh, it's easy. I just took away everything that wasn't him. right? Like, in other words, like you just take all the things away that are not that core and that beautiful piece of art, which in this case is your business. Don't
Yeah.
add to them. Like, I'd rather take something away than add something all the time.
Yeah, I'm agree with that. Yeah, and it's we say co-creative in the sense that your business, if you have a business plan and you have a vision, you're forced to say, well, this is what I want it to look like. This is what we're going to do in 5 years from now. This is all this stuff. That's nice. You know, man makes his plans and God laughs. Right. So then
Yeah.
you realize that had I actually stuck to that and it happened the way I did, the beautiful things that did come from the the staff and the customers and the things that I was like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't expect that, but I'm going to say yes to that. It wasn't in my business plan. I'm going to grow this part of the business that's revealed itself. So there's a revealing that happens. So you're almost not required maybe to see David exactly the same way, but you're growing something that has a potentiality built into it that you yourself, like I'll plant a seed. I know it's an oak tree, but I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't
Mhm.
know if it's going to be bent by the wind in the direction of north or east or whatever. Um, it's going to be unique. It's going to be of that type, but it's going to be its own thing because of its environment. And if we give up the stress of trying to form fit everything into this mold, then we give ourselves the ability to receive the satisfaction of what is being created before our eyes. It's the same thing with kids, like I had, look back at pictures of my son who's turning 11 pretty soon, and he was not too long ago just very, very small, and now he's not. He's got his whole personality right now, and it's going to change again in 10 years. And that's a joy to watch. But I can't
Yeah.
sit there and feel like, well, I'm real disappointed that my prediction like 6 years ago about whatever thought I had didn't come true. Boy, that would stink. I wouldn't get to enjoy the journey of it. And he would be robbed of his father's best attention.
Mm.
And so your business, I think, like a coffee shop, needs people to embrace the adventure of becoming, embrace the people and allow them that same kind of grace, which we often don't do because we can be perfectionists and towards ourselves.
Yeah.
We have episodes talking about how you need to say I'm sorry sometimes. You need
Hmm.
to admit when you were wrong and show people that you can be in process, because
Yeah.
then they feel okay admitting when they did stuff. It's like, oh yeah, that's kind of messed up there. I'll do better. You set the example. And that's how great businesses are built. It's not through this myth of perfection. It's just in the humanity of it all.
Oh, man. Amen. You know, it, do you know who Jocko Willink is?
Yeah, yeah.
He has, that concept of extreme ownership, which I think is brilliant. He's like, dude, own everything. Like, own it all. Everything's like, if something happened, I own that. Because as soon as you own something, you liberate yourself of this idea that, oh, if I admit I screwed up, then that makes me look bad or whatever, or somebody's going to lose respect for me or whatever's going on in your ego and all this. It's actually like me, they respect you a whole lot more when you're, because they look up to you and you're like, our leader just said, dude, I screwed that up. Like, it's not your fault. It's mine. Like, I own that. Guess what? When you own it, now you can control what happens next. How do we respond to me screwing this thing up? Like, that's a very liberating thing. We keep ourselves in this, you lock yourself in this prison of like, if you have this idea that you have to be perfect and you can't admit you're wrong and your ego is going, no, 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 no. Man, that is a stressful thing. It is like highly, highly, it's almost intoxicating when you start going, yep, that was my bad. Like, I screwed that up. I do it all the time with my wife and my kids. I'm like, yeah, that is 100% me. I suck at that thing and I really screwed up. Like, I own it. But like, then you have the ability to go, and here's how I'm going to grow and get better from that.
Yeah, there's a releasing yourself from that pursuit of the image of that, perfection.
Pursuit of the image of perfection. Yes.
Yeah, it really is freeing because then you actually get to have a better self-image.
Yep.
And your self-image is not based on comparison that you're making to some avatar that is a like all these examples of people in the world from history and modern day that you're like, well, I want to Frankenstein myself, like cobble together I want the skill of this person and the integrity of that person, and I'm just going to combine it into this like Captain Planet version of myself. And it never works out that way. You're just who you are,
Yeah.
and that's why this book, or there's another book by Thomas Sterner. He's like a ma not magician. I don't say magician, is musician, tunes pianos and very accomplished. But it was kind of like this Zenish book,
Mhm.
from his perspective of the practicing mind. And he was talking about the mind, the intentional way of going about practicing a thing without judgment. And he mentions this example of a flower. And the question is, at what point is a flower perfect? Is
Mm.
it seed? Is it the when it comes out of the ground, when it's just about to flower, when it's in full bloom? The truth is that at each stage is appropriate and it's perfect. And if
Yeah.
you think of yourself that way, boy, that that releases a ton.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Uh, but we've been going a little while, man. You got a couple more minutes, or you probably, I totally did not respect your time. I should have asked you in an hour. I was too engrossed and engaged. I
I'm
apologize.
glad you got that big coffee though. That's a feel.
Um, well, so, okay. Just out of curiosity, because I'm kind of like very obsessed with, the importance of what we put into our bodies and how we, um, exercise our bodies as being, I think it's it all so much of success and success, whatever we want to call it, fulfillment in business flows downstream from that. There's this idea of like just grinding and working hard and working your all this kind of stuff, but like you eventually hit a wall with that stuff. I've been there. I've done that, learned that lesson. Um, I have a buddy who he like makes fun of me because I do my Sunday sprint day videos on LinkedIn. He's like, man, this is for work. I'm like, dude, here's the thing. Like what you put into your body and what you do with your body to keep yourself feeling healthy and the sleep you get, like these basic things that we overlook, like they actually are a critical, in my mind, they're a critical investment into being a better and more present friend, husband, parent, and business owner.
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
agree with that?
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, we're just talking about the metrics of you've got your percentages of labor and profit and cost of goods. These are important things, right? Because without the baseline of function, you can't do all of the fun, dreamy stuff on top of it, right?
Yep.
And so if you can't if you can't move your body, you can't you can't say yes to somebody says, "Hey, why don't you come do like a talk?" And you're just think in pain. I don't want to travel. I don't want to go. Um,
Mhm.
somebody says, you need to cover a shift, and you're just like, oh, I can't do that. Like, you can do what you can to make yourself strong so that you can do more things and say yes to more things. I think so. Yeah. And, and you and I are on a kind of a similar wavelength with this, I think, with diet and exercise. I think you're a little farther along than I am in these things, but I've definitely burned myself out to the degree that I don't even know how long ago. It must have been about 5 years ago that I threw my back out picking up a sock in the laundry room, and I was on the floor in writhing pain. I ended up getting steroid and medication and combination with something else that sent me to the ER because apparently now I was allergic to it. So after the Benadryl injection and everything else, um, I was just on the couch and I had a bad back for the better part of the year or so. And I realized I was not developing strength at all in my
Yeah.
body. Talk
Yeah.
about humbling stuff where you can't work now. You happy? You can't work now because you didn't just take a second to do some basics because you were too obsessed with doing the skipping to the other stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, you're right. Sprint day, I mean, gosh, that is work. It is that's self-care.
Yeah.
So
It's an investment though. It really is. I try to tell, I'm like, you have to, again, this is all from like screwing it up and getting it wrong, right? Going, oh, okay. But you know, we I don't think there's some big grand conspiracy of big food and big pharma and they're sitting in some smoke-filled room. But the reality is there's this invisible hand of incentives that works really well for a lot of people if we stay, addicted to unhealthy things that we put in our body, and then we go and then we hurt our bodies, or we're, whether it's a physical ailment or a mental health ailment, and then we just go and we get medications to solve that, and then there's just this revolving door that works really well for a lot of people. Um, if you are a a customer of pain and bad health. And
the
I
mode.
always argue you don't have to be in that. You don't have to live like that. Can you stop tomorrow? Probably not. But can you start making really intentional decisions about, like I mean, you walk, what, 3 or 4 miles a day? Just walk every day. And if you have to get up earlier, okay, do that. Like whatever. um, Make sure that you're getting good sleep at night. Put your phone down an hour before you get in the bed and get 8 hours of sleep. Because if you're getting good sleep and you're putting, generally non-processed, like outer aisle stuff into your body, and you're, you know, spending time outside, walking and getting sun and fresh air. I mean, this stuff's so freaking simple. It's like, yeah, but that just seems too easy. Well, I can promise you, if you execute on the easy, boring, simple stuff every day for a long time, the gains begin to compound to a point that you probably won't even imagine. Like, and then you go, holy cow, it's actually just being intentional and deliberate and um, doing it every day
Yeah.
works wonders. And then you're out from under this, like, the matrix or whatever of all this like incentive that's designed to keep you in a kind of a bad place.
Yeah, treating the symptoms, not the cause.
Not the call. Yeah,
Cause is
that's right.
too simple. Like if you just the way I started doing like 10 years ago, I was 60 pounds heavier. And I started by simply waking up and like doing one or two push-ups and taking a vitamin. It's like, okay, I'm gonna do some health stuff.
Yeah.
And eventually you just kind of like tack on more and you do that whole like James Clear thing where you become the person who does that stuff. You take on the identity. Um,
Yes.
right? So that's the Atomic Habits book. But it really is about identity because there's a self-defeating idea that, well, this is just who I am. I'm this. And
Yeah.
therefore people
That's a
like me,
fixed mindset.
yeah, people like me do things like this. There's a book by Lonnie Basham called With Winning in Mind. He talks about he's a rifle shooter, Olympic rifle shooter champion, and he talks about how his self-talk was more like people like me make bullseye. You like talk yourself into this, but you go on this journey of also intentional practice, and it compounds over time. And it's you know what? It's really incredible to think about. We have an episode called "Would You Hire You?" It's a good question
Mm.
yourself as a boss. Like if you came in for an interview, would you, based on what you show, would you hire you? But we get incredulous with our staff for coming in hungover or
Right.
coming and they're like, yeah, I was up till 3 a.m. I was like partying and all this stuff. They don't have to be hungover either. They could just be like getting sick all the time.
Yeah.
There's some part of us that's just like, God, you're so irresponsible.
Yeah. Right.
But we're like, my version of that is just like I have to be irresponsible in this way. You don't understand. You, on the other hand, I need you to be on shift so you
Yeah.
can't. Oh, and by the way, here's some, emergency over in the barista closet that you should, use to supplement. So we're even going so far as to try to help influence their health while at the same time degrading whatever our own. And so
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's kind of telling, I think.
It really is. It really is. Well, 60 pounds, dude, I mean, that's amazing. Um,
I didn't realize I had that much to lose, honestly. I was just living life.
so you walk every morning? Is that what you walk 3 or 4 miles every day? I've
Yeah,
seen videos of you. You're out walking in the woods and doing like you record. I think that's freaking awesome, man. I love that.
sometimes. Yeah. It's a 10,000 step type of thing.
Okay.
10,000, I'm working my way up, and sometimes you'll do like a little bit in the morning and then have to get to work, but then, bookend the day. At the end of the day, just walk a little bit more. That works well. I've been doing recently for the last year and a few months the carnivore diet, um, which kind of lost me the last 20 some odd pounds. At 46, it's not as efficient inside the old bod, So you
Yeah.
gotta do sometimes some what people might think of as extreme things, but the more I learn about this stuff, the less extreme it actually seems to me.
Well, how did you get turned on to that? I'm curious.
I think I first heard about it because of Jordan Peterson's daughter, Michaela Peterson, in her story.
Yeah, right.
I think is also like Joe Rogan, probably podcast, or it just floats around with the popular proponents of it. Um, and that got me turned on to Dr. Ken Berry on YouTube, and then you get like Dr. Sean Baker, and then there's other people out there. I forget this woman's name. They're medical professionals who have long-term self and other client studies on the effects of this thing.
Yeah,
It just made sense to me, and I
yeah,
can sometimes be an all or nothing kind of guy,
right.
and so I thought, you know, I'm gonna try this, and I felt rather desperate because my father's had a couple of heart attacks. My mother has been battling cancer for a long time, pretty stable at right now, but it's a thing that you think about genetically. Like, I'm the product of these people.
Right.
I want to give myself and my family the best chance of my
Yeah.
own success. So yeah, that's how I got turned on.
Um, yeah, it's one of those things that a few years ago seemed like that is like crazy extreme, but now it's much more because there are a lot of people like if you look at elimination diets,
Hmm.
there's never an elimination diet that eliminates meat. Like they eliminate starch or plants or whatever it is, I mean, but there's nothing that eliminates meat. Like, and then the goal is like you get, because I had like a lot of like GI issues and all this stuff. I'm like, I don't know. I thought I eat healthy. Well, yeah, but I have like things that bother my system. And so I went to like, okay, I'm going to just try this carnivore, like just meat for a while. And it went, I mean, it's just night and day. Like, resolved everything in a big way. And then, so again, it's about cutting down like to the very foundation, the basics. And then, I started adding back in like fruits and things like that. And I even know which ones now, if I eat that, like I'll probably have some problems. Like, so, but it really is an interesting um, shift in the idea that you can just consume this one thing consistently and that it can make a massive, I mean, what's her name? Michaela Peterson. I mean, she almost died. She had all that like arthritis. Like if you look at the old footage of her and like, and then her now, it's ridiculous. It's hard, but again, it's like, it's hard to believe like, wait a minute, all you did was just, she has that lion diet, has like meat, water and salt. That's it. It seems too simple. Like, didn't you have to get all these doctors and all that? No, no. Like, it's just actually, the doctors probably unintentionally cause more problems. Like, there's iatrogenics, which is like, a medical term for causing harm while intending to do good. And I think that happens a lot
Ooh.
in that space. But anyway, I'm happy to hear your personal journey with that, and I congratulate you. It is not an easy journey. It's harder as we get older. particularly if you want to continue to lose some of those extra pounds. And you got to start building muscle because muscle is going to help burn it. And there's like almost no other way to do it. And to the
Yeah.
pull-ups thing, which we talked about, keep that bar, get $20 bar. I always tell people you can get a $20 bar on Amazon, stick it in your doorway, and every time you go under the door, just do one pull-up or do one negative or whatever. Just do that throughout the day. It's amazing. Simple. Just have the discipline, keep it
Yeah.
simple, and just be patient, right?
Create
It's
it
true
into your
in
life.
fitness, it's true in diet, it's true in business. It all comes back to that concept.
So there's a well, for me, like 3 months in, it was had just to get used to it, because you could call it detoxing, or the body's just responding. The gut flora has to change in order
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
be that adaptive and all this stuff. But the fact that it's been a year and so many months since I've done it, and it's fine, kind of kind of shines a light on some of the other stuff that I thought was absolutely necessary, that I needed to do, whether that was the massive supplementations or the inclusion of lots of other kind of Ayurvedic type of, remedies for inflammation. And I'm not a doctor, and I'm not here to tell anybody that they're wrong. But it does speak to this idea of finding the simple and most effective thing. The highest leverage thing can sometimes be the simplest,
Yeah.
and being so excellent in the basics makes the other things superfluous in a lot of ways. So
Yeah.
it feels like it goes back to like the if you're serving people so well, you're caring and communicative and generous with your staff, and the product is just consistently great. Are you really going to stress that much about your tech stack? Are you are you going to
Yeah.
supplement your existence because you're treating symptoms that are caused by the root stuff that you're not doing well?
Yeah.
Because that's exactly what we see. So it's like physical, and it's also, vocational in a lot of
Yeah.
ways.
I'll conclude with this. To your point, my personal, one of my third places is Publix, the
Mm.
grocery store. Do you have Publix in Kentucky? Are they there yet?
I don't know if it's in Kentucky, but I'm in Louisville, but we don't have one here. I've been to
But
one
have you
before.
heard of it?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's one near our house. And I was always I've always been like a Harris Teeter person, but there was like one that opened near our house, and I don't know what it was. I had to go there one day. I was like, man, they were really nice there. And then I went again, and I went again, and I went, like I don't know if their prices are good or they're high, or I don't know. But I can tell you one thing: every time I go in that place, literally, I'll tell my wife, don't ever bother going to the store. Anytime we need something, I'll go. Because I actually love going to Publix because they're always nice. They're always present. They make eye contact. They smile. It is so clear how much effort has gone into that there that I actually get excited to go to a freaking grocery store. But you can do that in any business, right? Like people just, I mean, the bar is so freaking low now. If you just do that, forget your
Yeah.
tech stack. Just get your staff to care and like train them on how on serving with a servant's heart, and everything else will just fade into it doesn't matter because people will come back over and over and over. I go there almost every day just because I like the experience. Like I'll
Mm.
make a reason to go to Publix because they're so good at just like being happy and nice and kind and intentional.
That's
Wow. Isn't that cool?
that. Yeah. And it's such a great testament to the work that in the midst of the trainings, and you put yourself in the position of the floor manager of various departments, the dark nights of the soul that they have about, is it worth it? Is it,
Yeah.
what am I doing? Or this person is like giving me problem, all of that is for the purpose of you on this show telling me that you love and go there maybe more than you should, you know, uh,
100%. Yeah.
right? Because of the work it translated through into the experience, and that kind of a validation. man, you can't download that, and the work is worth it that they're doing behind the scenes. And anybody who signs up to do that kind of work, I mean, I think in the onboarding process, we need to like show them these testimonials of people like you, that or that customer who's been at the coffee shop and their kid grew up, going to get the mocha with them in the morning. And the staff banded together and bought a graduation present for them or something like that. Like that's the stuff that we need to connect to the work so that the work has this point of fulfillment. And grocery stores, gosh, coffee shops, there's so many opportunities to have those experiences just proliferate across, and we need it especially because of the phones, and we're so isolated, we're so hungry for that kind of a satiating experience that we'll chase it.
We'll chase it. That's what I'm doing. You just nailed it. I'm chasing it. It's so rare. We want it so bad that when we find it, we will chase it.
Mm.
And if that's how you run your coffee shop, the tech stack, the price increases, just lean into that simple. It's simple and it's basic, but it's hard. But if you're willing to do the hard work to train that staff at Publix to treat me that way, it will, it will pay off. And I have a lot of buddies that are, they're business owners too. And we always just talk about how the problem right now in our culture is that the bar is so freaking low. The opportunity is that the bar is so freaking low that if you're just getting basics right every day, people will just be, you just nailed it. They'll chase it. Amazing. Dude, we'll wrap this up. What a cool conversation, man. I'm so glad we got a chance to hang out and talk, Chris. And I appreciate all that you do. And I have a lot of respect for you and your belief system and your philosophies. And I just thank you as a fan of coffee and as a fan of small businesses that you're out there helping these businesses all over the place start and grow and thrive and make things better for all of us so that we can chase what they're doing.
Man, Will, thank you. It really is an honor. I've long worked with and used Schedule Fly in my career, and it has spoken to the things that now that I know you a lot better over the years, I know come from the heart. It's evident in the work that you do, similar to Publix, It's just a meaningful thing in a sea of things that can lack meaning. And I'm glad for the consistency of it. And again, it's great to talk to you. I love this conversation.
Yeah, man. Absolutely. All right, dude. Well, we'll wrap it up. Thank you. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for watching. Rate us or thumbs up us or comment or whatever. As Chris knows, the more of these episodes get some sort of engagement or a rating or whatever, then the more the algorithm tells more people to listen to it. And if you like the content and you want more people to hear it, then go for it. Thank you all. Chris, thank you. That's a wrap. See ya.